Hello everyone. Okay, I hope we're all having a wonderful day. On this little video I'm going to make today, I'm going to focus mainly on religion under the Tsars and the communists, and in particular you need to be looking at obviously similarities in treatment of religion and religious groups across Russia and differences of religion and religious groups. We will kind of come back to this because when we do one of the later topics about nationalities and how the different ethnic groups were treated, again, some of the religious groups pop up in that section as well. Now, what I'm going to start off with is discussing the Russian Orthodox faith. Okay. Now, here's a picture which shows the Orthodox Church. It's been around in Russia for centuries. It's very traditional. There's lots of images and lots of paintings of saints and all that kind of stuff. And I really want to focus in some ways upon this cathedral. This cathedral was built by Tsar Nicholas I to celebrate the victory over Napoleon, and it's known as Christ the Saviour in Moscow. And in some ways, the fate of this church kind of shows the fate of Russian Orthodoxy in Russia across the period. Now, as you should know, under the Tsars, the Russian Orthodox faith was kind of one of the pillars, if you like, which upheld autocracy and Tsardom and that whole system of government. And the Orthodox Church and the Tsars were very, very close. I mean, just think of Mr. Pop, for example, who had that cabinet, that government position. He was also part of the Synod, which is like the council of the Orthodox Church. Much of it was under state control, and the Orthodox Church was a major landowner as well, and therefore for the people of Russia was associated very closely with Tsardom, which was fine while Tsardom was kind of flourishing, but obviously once Tsardom was under threat and once Tsardom collapsed, then obviously the Orthodox Church was therefore seen as a target for those who despised autocracy. Under the period which we're looking at, under the late Tsardom period, did see a major religious revival across Russia. Lots of new religious writings were made at this time. There were lots of discussions over religion and the ideas of Jesus and the Orthodox Church. A big increase of prayer meetings as well that took place. Also at this time saw a real big revival of pilgrimages to holy places, mystics as well. Just think, Rasputin, who became this, the really incredibly important mystic who became very close to the Tsar and his family, Tsar Nicholas and his family, due to the illness of his son Alexei, and how they really believed that his mysticism was healing towards his son who had haemophilia. Over 1,000 monasteries were built in this latter period of the Tsardom. There are 80,000 churches and chapels. 1940, 95,000 priests. Russia in Europe was by far the most religious of all the powers, I would say, in Europe. Very close to this very traditional kind of religion. So the Orthodox Church seemed pretty secure and pretty much kind of in place. And obviously this picture here shows this massive cathedral built in Moscow. Now, once the Tsar fell, the Bolsheviks targeted the Orthodox Church because many of them, probably quite rightly to a large extent, saw the Orthodox Church as kind of upholding Tsardom and protecting Tsardom, preaching the merits of Tsardom. And so obviously when Tsardom fell, then the Orthodox Church was kind of defenseless against the Bolsheviks. They didn't help themselves when many of the Orthodox Church openly supported the opponents of Bolshevism in that civil war. Many of them supported the whites, and therefore, especially for Lenin, they were seen as enemies of the people. 1,200 priests were executed under Lenin. Their land was confiscated. Their buildings were confiscated. During the Civil War, many priests were targeted by the Cheka and the secret police. With glee, they knocked down church buildings, melted down the giant bells in the belfries to use for weapons. And this continues into the 1930s under Stalin as well. By 1939, there were fewer than 500 Orthodox religious houses still remaining. 95,000 priests were shot under Stalin. And the cathedral which we're looking at, this was the fate. It was actually demolished under the time of Stalin in 1931. So, in many ways, this building is epitomising kind of the downfall of Orthodoxy under Lenin and Stalin. In some ways, under Stalin, it's a little bit surprising. Well, I won't say it's surprising. It's a little bit ironic because his early education was actually in a seminary, and his mother wanted Stalin to be a priest. Obviously, he took a very different kind of career path. And apparently, when his mother was dying, she kind of told Stalin off and said, "You'd have made a much better priest." Yeah, anyway, so that's the fate of the Orthodox Church under Stalin. And during the Second World War, there was a revival of the church to some extent. Remember, the Second World War is known as the Great Patriotic War in Russia. There was this turning back and looking at previous Tsars, and films were made of like Ivan the Terrible. But also the church made a revival as well. Many of them reopened during the Second World War. Again, the Russians felt, many Russian ordinary people clearly felt that they needed that kind of saviour, if you like, in terms of God in their times of real crisis. And Stalin allows this to take place. I'm sure it was kind of kept under the eye, and I'm sure, you know, you're making sure the priests who did exist were kind of on the right message, so to speak. But there was this reopening of churches during the Second World War. After the Second World War, there was then a tightening up again of the Russian Orthodox faith. Okay, under Khrushchev, there were a few churches reopened, as we see here, and our famous cathedral, which we're discussing before, was actually the demolished land had just been left neglected since 1931. It was transformed into an open-air swimming pool. Looking at the steam coming out, I guess it was heated as well, given the temperatures in Moscow. I think it would have to be. So the church was demolished in 1931 and then transformed into this giant open-air swimming pool. Khrushchev had very little time for religion. In 1961, he introduced what he called a new moral code, which was essentially a communist substitute for the Bible. Okay, so persecution of the church kind of, you didn't get people being shot for being priests under Khrushchev, but it was definitely discouraged. And he personally had, you know, as I just said, no time for religion in any way, shape or form. Now, obviously, our course ends at Khrushchev, but it's quite interesting just to see what happened to this church following the fall of communism. It remains an open-air swimming pool until the fall of the Soviet Union. Under Putin, before Putin, under Boris Yeltsin, who became the leader of Russia after communism, you saw a big revival of the Orthodox Church, and this has really continued into Putin's Russia as well. The cathedral, which we mentioned before, the swimming pool was drained. I'm not sure whether they built another one somewhere else. And now the Saviour of the Christ Cathedral has been rebuilt, and you can see a nice picture of it there on the left-hand side. Vladimir Putin has very much associated himself with the Orthodox Church. There's been a big revival of the church in modern-day Russia. The bones of Tsar Nicholas II and his family are now seen as saints in the Orthodox Church. So there's been a big change of fortune in the Orthodox Church following the end of communism. Now, you don't actually need to know that bit for the exam, but I think it's just quite interesting. I think it's interesting anyway to look at that. The other religion I want to have a look at, and there's some questions in the booklet on this, which you've got, is the Jews in Russia as well. Now, it might not be surprising, but they don't have a particularly nice history in Russia. What I'd like to do for the Jews in Russia is I'll send you a document which is from the Evans and Jenkins book, which kind of deals with the Jews under Alexander III. There's also got a bit in there about the Jews under Stalin as well. I think in the booklet, if I remember correctly, I've actually got the booklet here, it tells you what pages to have a look at as well. And actually, same for the Orthodox Church, I just remembered, make sure you have a look at the Holland book, which is on Moodle, to get some information for that. As I said, of the Jews, it's got Evans and Jenkins 75 to 78. That's what I'm going to send you out. I'll also include a bit on here for Stalin as well, because there's a couple of questions about Stalin. And then you've got these think questions. I think that should say acting, not acing. Think about similarities and differences between how Stalin and Alexander III treated the Jews. Now, when we come to a later topic area on nationalities, we do a little bit about the Jews under Nicholas II. Again, you might as well, as we're looking at the Jews and thinking about similarities and differences of treatment, have a look at the Jews under Nicholas II. And for this, what I suggest you do, if you go into the Moodle, if you look under the nationalities and empire section, which is, let me just get there, which is here, okay, resources on the empire, and it loads up, and it is this book here, Westwood, Tsars, Nationalities and Jews. If you click on here, now we don't need to know all this at the moment because we haven't done the nationalities, so we can just fast forward, if that's the right word, scroll down, that's probably a better phrase, down through the nationalities, and eventually come to here, the Jews in Russia. And again, it's discussing the Jews under Alex II and Alex III, and if memory serves me right, it talks quite a lot about Nicholas II. I was a bit surprised because when we did him at sixth form college many years ago, no, the Tsar wasn't still alive at that time. We didn't really do much about the Jews under Nicholas, and I just thought he was a bit dim, Nicholas II. Nice but dim was kind of my general impression of him. However, if you read this, he actually was quite nasty and quite anti-Semitic as well. So it's got some nice stuff here about some of the nastiness that happened to the Jews under his reign, if you can call that nice, which isn't very nice in itself. So what I'd like to do is to do that stuff, obviously, for Evans and Jenkins on Alex III and Stalin and the Jews, but do look at the stuff on Nicholas II, and again add it to your bank of how they've been treated in a similar way, how they've been treated in a different way. Okay, in terms of Muslims and stuff under the Tsars and communists, again we'll probably look at them a little bit more when we're doing nationalities, but again probably not surprising that the communists discouraged all religion and so therefore not very keen on Muslims. However, they didn't really persecute them to a great deal, and actually the Tsars as well, they kind of left them be, largely speaking, because again if you think about it, the Muslim population of Russia are quite a long way from Moscow. You're looking at down in Georgia, in the Corsicans, and kind of places like Kazakhstan and stuff like that, so they're many thousands of miles away. Okay, so any problems on that, then let me know, and I will see you all in the not too distant future.